All I'm going to do at the beginning here is just tell Philip, who should be listening, you are not allowed to excerpt in any way, shape, or form this video and put it on Instagram so that the trolls can feed off of it, because I know what's going to happen. A reasonable excerpt will be taken. It will be put up on Instagram, and, well, the trolls will have at it for what I'm about to do. So it's all or nothing. We may park this whole thing on YouTube, but we're not going to excerpt it. I want to do just strict analysis for you on the state of the election. This is my opinion, yes, but it is based on talking to a lot of people, Democrat and Republican, the concerns on both sides. So we are now on the Monday before the first presidential debate. We're headed into real general election season. A month from this week, Donald Trump will have the Republican endorsement officially. He'll be the nominee. A few weeks later, Joe Biden will be officially the Democrats' nominee. And there are things happening. Polling is narrowing after Donald Trump's conviction. Donald Trump has erased Joe Biden's cash advantage. The media is whispering there are problems for the Republicans. The Republicans are whispering there are problems for the Democrats. The Democrats are whispering, oh my gosh, really, we're going with Joe? So what's the lay of the land here for everybody? If I were a Republican right now, I would be concerned about a couple of things. If I were a Republican, I would be concerned about the number of Republicans who just seem to refuse to consolidate behind Donald Trump. And in fact, his conviction in New York has played a role in that. As partisan as that conviction strikes so many of us, some people think that it was probably reasonable, trust the jury, and yep, he's a convicted felon. Do we really want a convicted felon as president of the United States? Now, here's why this matters. It's going to be a very tight election, most people presume, and I think most people are right. In a very tight election, every vote does matter, and turnout matters, and having 10% of the Republican Party say, I can't vote for a convicted felon, in a close election, that could matter. The other thing that if I were Republican, I would stay up at night, have nightmares about, is the turnout game for the GOP. The turnout game for the Republican Party does not look promising. They have outsourced the turnout the vote operation in swing states to several groups, one of which is the Turning Point USA kids, which is like putting a bank robber in charge of security for the weekend at a bank. I mean, these are grifting operations that are going to bleed the GOP dry, and they're saying things like, well, we're going to turn out Republicans. We're going to ignore independent swing voters. We're going to focus on maximizing Republican Party turnout. That is insanity. The Republican ground game could be done pretty effectively, and there's time to build a Republican ground game. Philip, you can excerpt this part, I think. If I were a Republican designing the ground game, here's what I would do. Rely in states that have functioning, competent Republican parties on those competent, functioning Republican parties, and then build in the swing states. We know where the swing states are going to be, and the ones that Trump wants to win: Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Everyone largely agrees if Trump wins Pennsylvania, he wins. You're going to want to concentrate your ground game there. You're not just going to want to identify Republicans and get them out to vote. You're going to want to identify Jewish voters who might be open to Trump, of which there are a good number in Georgia and Pennsylvania, in suburban and ex-urban areas where they're tending to look more and more like rural people. Ignore urban cores. Go to the far reaches of the suburbs out into the ex-urban territory where it starts to become pasture land. You find Jewish voters and young black men in those areas, and you get them to go vote for Donald Trump. You put together very quickly in every state, in every county, there are Republican operatives who know ground game operations. For the Republicans and the Democrats, you get them on your payroll quickly, and you start the door-to-door process. Buddy of mine, Drew Ryan, manufactures a program called Campaign Sidekick. It's actually very impressive. Has a database of all the voters in every state, and you can do a walk list. and you can do real-time check-in. In 2022, it turns out that some campaigns and GOP operatives who were using other programs were saying that they were knocking on people's doors and they were actually sitting at bars. Turns out one of the reasons the GOP didn't do so well in some of the swing states in 2022 is that the ground game operatives who were so impressive and so overwhelming, turns out their GPS locations reveal them to be at bars saying that they were knocking on doors, and they were not. Put people on payroll, pay them, and track them to make sure they're knocking on doors. It's all possible with software. And there are issues too. If you're a Republican, you need Donald Trump to have the very best ground game possible. And if you're a Republican who wants Donald Trump to win, you should be volunteering to go knock on doors. Knocking on doors matters more than any ad to get people out to vote. Remind people to vote, get their absentee ballot, knock on doors again, follow up with them, repeat the process, and they will turn out for you. Republicans, you got a long way to go on your ground game this year. It's sclerotic. It hasn't worked well. In a state like Georgia or Virginia, Glenn Youngkin and Brian Kemp have very good ground games. In fact, Glenn Youngkin borrowed from Brian Kemp's ground game. In Georgia, a swing state, Kemp has a very good ground game. Pity Donald Trump decided to burn bridges with him. Maybe they can be mended. In Arizona, you as a party, you need the Trump campaign to handle outside outreach because Turning Point USA has shown no capacity to do it effectively, and the party in Arizona is a real poop show. If you're a Donald Trump person, you want the Donald Trump campaign to handle the outreach and the targeting of voters in Arizona. In Nevada, same thing. You want the Trump campaign to do it, but you also have a governor, a Republican governor who won the state. I bet you can borrow from him. Wisconsin, the GOP has a pretty good operation. They just need to turn people out. Michigan, same thing. You need to turn people out. You got a pretty good operation, although it went kablooey in 2022. The crazies came in and tried to take over the party. The sane people forced out the crazies. You got an opportunity to rebuild your ground game there. Pennsylvania, all hands on deck. You got Dave McCormick running. He's going to be at the gathering, by the way. Dave McCormick is the Republican nominee for the Senate. He's got deep pockets. He can help fund a good ground game operation. You've got Republicans are hungry for a win in Pennsylvania. Trump is hungry for a win in Pennsylvania. He needs to not outsource it. He needs to actually do it himself. His campaign fund the ground game with people loyal to him. Remember, when Barack Obama ran for president in 2008, one of the unique things Barack Obama did is he brought in-house all the consultants. Republicans and Democrats for years had hired consultants from their consulting firms to come in and work for them on commission. And Barack Obama said, no, sirree, you're going to work for me. You're going to work exclusively for me. I'm going to put you on salary and give you benefits, and you will be mine. You will not work for other candidates. You will be solely focused on my election. And it worked. Meanwhile, John McCain outsourced to a bunch of strategists and consultants who you will no doubt find humorous are now anti-Republicans running people to try to stop Donald Trump. If I'm a Republican, my ground game is what's keeping me up at night. And that 10% of Republicans who just can't bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump. And there's a slow shift in the polls that's starting to suggest the conviction is affecting some people. If I'm a Democrat, tell you what keeps me up at night. Joe Biden. Joe Biden is an 80-plus-year-old man who is at war with the English language and can't find his way off stage. And he's decided to go overboard placating the left. I don't know if you know this, Joe Biden's got a new deputy spokesman at the White House. The guy, remember the dude at the Department of Energy who dressed up like a dog for sexual activities and dressed in dresses and stole women's luggage? That dude was insane, and this guy is no better and has tweeted defund the police and get rid of ICE and elimination of the border, pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel stuff. And he's now a communication spokesperson for Joe Biden who says, pay no attention to all the stuff I was putting on Twitter 5 minutes ago. If I were a Democrat, I would be concerned, just as Republicans are, about that 10% or so of voters who think they just can't vote for Donald Trump, with that 10% of voters on the left who cannot vote for progressives anymore because they're so anti-Semitic and so hostile. Young black men, I would be freaked out about young black men if I were on the left, and clearly they are. That's why they keep sending Kamala Harris out there to try to woo young black men. If I were a Democrat, I would be concerned that Joe's not getting any younger, and every day that goes by in a high-stress situation of the world, he's going to have another elder moment, and it's going to be all sorts of problems. If I were a Democrat, I would be concerned that Donald Trump is now outraising Joe Biden financially. If I were a Democrat, I would be concerned about the size of the turnout. If Donald Trump can mobilize people who very often don't show up and yet are energized because they're angry about the state of the economy, if I were a Democrat, I would be nervous about them. The fact of the matter is this. Democrats are on defense with Joe Biden, and there are more things to be concerned about if you're a Democrat. If you're a Republican, Trump's going to be Trump. That's baked into the equation. The conviction is somewhat baked into the equation now, where a month later, he's still slightly ahead in the polling. The CBS News poll has him up 1. Everything's within the margin of error, which is why you got to be concerned about the people who might not show up because it's Donald Trump. And you got to be concerned about the ground game, because you've got to maximize every possible vote. And there's no sign right now that the Republican ground game has what it takes to turn those people out to vote. And Joe Biden has a war machine. Your ground game and your support levels. But if you're a Democrat, you got to worry about the economy turning south. You got to worry about international affairs. You got to worry about a terrorist attack. You got to worry about Joe Biden's senior moments. You've got to worry about Joe Biden's ties to the progressives. You got to worry about Joe Biden with young black men. You got to worry about Joe Biden with Jewish voters. You've got a lot to worry about if you're a Democrat right now in the United States. And you can say, no, there's no way that Donald Trump will ever win. And this is the problem. I am starting to hear Democrats say repeatedly, Donald Trump will not win the presidency. And that's what they said in 2016. And the only way they've been able to rationalize the two is to say Russia stole the election. And honest people know that's not true. And the Democrats are forced to lie to themselves to say Donald Trump will not be president, except the title is former president, because he did get elected president when they insisted he never could.